Alright, I've got the shop to myself right now, so no copyrighted background music at the time. So what I've got right here is I've mocked this up enough times to figure out what I do like about it, what's working for me, and what I don't like about it, what's not working for me. This end over here, where the cable comes through, I want it to aim the cable at this pivot point because that pivot point has a radius, and if it's fixed in this position, as it radiuses down, it puts a bind on the cable a little bit. So I think if the cable is aimed more towards that arc, it'll be a better fit. The bolt here, 6mm bolt, I was unable to tighten it all the way because that's also a pivot point at the end of the cable. It doesn't have a heim joint like these where those can swivel and all that. The end of the cable just has an eyelet through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld this bolt into position. I'm going to finish weld this pivot point. I like this pivot point. I like that angle. That's working for me. This pivot point on the long shift arm, I don't like that angle. I'm going to cut those two tacks. I'm going to open it up to where that's pretty much vertical, and that's also where my shift arm from the manual transmission will attach to this, inside the shift boot, of course. And then this plate I've already fabricated earlier in the video. This plate goes right there. It's just simple holes on each end, and then these other holes will be installed with hardware with spacers to space this plate from that plate and hold it at a fixed distance or a fixed spacing from this plate to that plate. And it needs to be far enough that these bushings don't rub this significantly. There are bushings, they can rub a little here and there. Also, we are using washers beneath there because these bolt heads at each pivot point have to clear this plate. And what I'm going to do is touch that up. We're going to use the same thickness, the same style of washer for each point. We'll pick out which washer fits it the best, and that's the washers we're going to go with. So I've got a pile of each size washer until I figure out which ones we're going to go with. And then these washers are actually for these spacers because these spacers aren't long enough to make that gap. You know what? I thought these were spacers that I purchased at a hardware store. I just realized these are homemade spacers, and I have the tubing for that. I'm going to actually remake these spacers, and they're going to be long enough to compensate for all these washers that we're using, and as well as the bushing. So we'll remake those, and that's all going to be dialed in. So watch along, and we'll get this done. Oh. Oh! There's our problem. I've moved this. Didn't have good ground. Yeah, I see it jumped an arc over there. I'll knock the edges off that with a grinder here in a minute, and probably go back and pretty that up with some fresh weld. I'm happy with my MIG welds. That actually got the heat turned up a little hot, but I'd rather it be hot than not warm enough. Yep, we'll go ahead and cut that. Cut these others and we'll meet you back here at the welding table and be welding shortly. Okay. Let's cut those tacks. Let's cut those tacks. One half of the tack cut. Hey, I'm going to interrupt this video just for a second. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your buddies, binge watch some of this stuff, dig up some of the older footage off the channel, because it's there. It's there to be watched, and that's how we're going to grow this channel. Is you guys have to go and watch those videos for me, because I can't do it. All right. So what we got here is I've mocked this up. I put the cable through. It does get enough movement here to go into all the gears. With the 5.5 inches I throw at 19 inches. You'll hear that a lot in this video. So that 5.5 inches I throw, we're pulling back on the lever to go from park to reverse to neutral to drive, and the cable needs pulled as well. So these linkages put together makes this pull when you're pulling back on that stick pretty good. We're taking 5.5 inches of travel way out there and still making 2.4 inches of travel at this point. One thing I ran into is this bolt when it goes through the end of the cable. When it goes through that cable, we can't tighten the cable or the bolt all the way because this has to be able to pivot. So what I've come up with is I've discovered that is too restrictive. I'm going to put it at a little bit of a cant. So this part being tacked will get cut and put it a little bit more of an angle that way. And then this bolt, I was going to try to remake this piece. There we go. I was going to try to remake that piece out of this material, but you can see this material is significantly less width, and it still has to go through that bushing still needs to go through it. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse this piece. And what my original goal was is to drill a 6mm hole through the new piece and use this 6mm bolt. 6mm fits the end of that cable perfectly. The new game plan is to just put this bolt in and weld it in place, and then use a self-locking nut on the back, and that will, with that self-locking nut, hold that cable and keep that cable from coming off. That's the game plan now. So instead of trying to remake this piece, I'm just going to drop that in place and weld it. I'm going to cut the extra length off of this. Probably going to go back and cut a little off of here and weld this up solid. And then also I've discovered I don't like the angle that this arm is at. This arm is mostly there for mock-up right now, but what I will do later is I'm going to take the shift arm off the manual transmission, or get another shift arm off of a manual transmission that fits a square body truck, and I will attach it to a stub of this, probably inside the shift boot. I will attach that shift arm to this. So right now I'm still keeping this full length, but later on I'll cut it off and make a stub out of it that will bolt the shift arm to. But I don't like the angle. I'm going to cut these tacks and bring that, open that up a little bit more, probably straight up to vertical, and that will give me enough wiggle that, and I'll just probably just still leave it tacked, but that'll give me some wiggle to attach the shift arm to later. So in the next couple segments here, we'll be cutting this tack, changing that angle. We'll be welding that, cutting that excess off. We'll radius this and weld this up solid. We'll cut that tack and retack it at vertical.